Stream is like,
We are live. Hello, hello, welcome. We are super excited to this episode of Take It and Run. We have a special, super special, one of my favorite people in the world, guest today, Mr. Merrill Jencks. Welcome.
hello, and thank you for having me.
Does it seem a little bit formal?
It does a little smidge, yeah.
No, let's bring people up to speed. Why did I invite you to come and do this special session with me today?
Because I'm annoyingly analytical, and we want to talk about pricing and pricing strategy and numbers, and that's pretty much my favorite thing to talk about. And so I guess you felt for some reason that I'd be qualified to talk on this topic.
Yeah, no, well, let's face it. Merrill is a market expert. He's a straight shooter. I mean, he wants to help agents understand how to track market data, how to absolutely crush it when it comes to creating a CMA that's going to help your clients understand. So, today what we're going to do is we're going to dive into real market strategy, rethinking how you're doing your CMAs, how to be more honest, especially if you're in a declining market. He's going to go over the numbers that you should be looking at to make sure that you are actually going to be able to convert, not just take listings, but take listings that you're going to be able to sell. So let's start with you, Merrill. What makes you a market knowledge expert?
There's a funny story was just popping into my head. If I can tangent really fast, I don't know if you remember, but we had a previous coach of ours, David Caldwell. Hopefully, I'm okay to drop his name on here. I'm sure I am. I remember one time he was on stage in an event, and someone asked him what his unique value proposition was. And he said, I know my market. I know my numbers. I know whether the average sales price is up or down. And it really bothers me. You know, as a coach, I get an opportunity to talk to agents all over the country. And to me, it's like the most basic metric to, it's the most common question we get is how's the market? And so I like to ask it of other agents all the time, A, because I just love numbers and I like hearing how the market is in other parts of the country. But B, I like to kind of see how satisfactory of a job they can do answering. And I'm here to tell you right now, at least 9 out of 10 agents that I have encountered don't do a great job of articulating what's happening in their market, at least statistically, right? They often give me an answer of how it makes them feel. Well, it's pretty good. Homes are still selling, but it doesn't give anyone like actual metrics to help them understand if I own a home, is the value of it going up or down right now.
So you believe that market knowledge is the first domino?
Yes, because it's a confidence, it's a confidence thing, and it's a trust thing. You probably know better on some of the surveys and things that NAR has done than I do. But, there's been all of these studies that show that the number one factor that a seller uses in choosing their agent is trustworthiness. And I have always felt that when I can show up more confident and really know what I'm talking about and appear as hopefully not just appear to be, but actually be the market expert, it's so much easier to establish trust with people.
Okay, so let's start before we jump into pricing in a downward market. That's going to be part 2 in the CMA. Where do you see that most agents are getting their data, and where should they be getting it? So, and then we'll talk about the habits. But first I want you to, I know that I see a lot of agents, they're like, I don't even know where to get this information. And maybe they just get a market stat newsletter. Like our marketplace sends out a stat newsletter. It's usually like 15 days into the month. So it's usually a little bit late, it feels like, to do a market update. I know a lot of people love keeping current matters, and I love keeping current matters as well. That's more of a national, so where do you see most agents getting their data, and where do you recommend that they actually go so that they can be a market expert?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like most agents, I don't even think they're getting data. And if they are, they don't understand it, or they don't know what to do with it, or they don't really know how to internalize it. And if you are subscribing to some sort of, a newsletter that comes to you, or the sort of joke I like to use is the little infographics that we sometimes get from our title reps of with the arrows pointing up and down, and they're more of like shareables that you can put on social media. It sort of feels like that's the extent of what's happening. But the problem with that is that different submarkets, if you can't just look at, okay, the whole Phoenix metro area is up or down, we'll get into that in a minute, but it's dramatically different inside of different submarkets. So just like, well, I'm going on a listing appointment and average prices in Phoenix are up 2%. So I'm going to tell this person the market's up. That could be, a really wrong statement. But here's the best part. All the data that you need to be able to really, improve your knowledge and improve how you can talk to people about this is all inside of your MLS. You don't need any extra software or tools. It does get a lot more fun and a lot easier with the paid version of ChatGPT, or I would imagine other AIs as well, as long as you have the ability to upload an Excel file and analyze it. But my favorite is to use ChatGPT. So there are, tools so you can get even more advanced, but you don't even need that to just start getting some of the basic metrics that you ought to know about what's happening in your market.
What's your opinion? And you and I may feel different on this. And I put in here, I would love for you guys to post in the chat, where do you get your data? So Angel said Trends Graphic. I love Altos reports. I know here in our marketplace, we have something called the Cromford report. So what's your opinion?
Rapid Stats.
Yeah, Rapid Stats. And so many of the agents MLS. So just for, if you're joining us for the first time, Merrill's an analytical driver. I'm an expressive. And so for me, right, it feels sometimes a little overwhelming, but I understand the importance of this being married to you and knowing that in our business, on our team, in our personal production, we study the numbers all the time. But what is your opinion on subscribing to something like Trends Graphics or Altos or the Cromford report, Rapid Stats, versus what I think you're saying is you should run these numbers yourself out of your MLS?
I don't have an issue with subscribing to some of those things and looking at some of the visuals. They can be very helpful. But I think that one of the gaps that exists is that agents don't understand what some of the numbers are, or what they mean, or what they represent or signify, because they're just reading it off of a paper and they don't really internalize it. So I do think there's power in running the numbers yourself and understanding how it was derived and understanding what was used in the data set. That's honestly one of my biggest annoyances with some of the ones that you can just subscribe to, is I don't really fully understand exactly how they got to that number. And I love, if I'm going to share numbers on social media, I want to be able to sort of back it up and say, I know exactly how this was calculated, right? Because just taking average prices, for example, average prices of what? Are you including manufactured homes? Are you including 55 plus communities? Are you including vacant land?
Okay.
It's so but when you run the search and you want to know what's happening in a specific neighborhood, or you want to know what's happening on homes with pools, or you want to know what's happening on the luxury market, or any of those types of things, you do really need to be able to run some of your own customized reports and numbers, in my opinion.
Okay, I like this. And Thomas says, new agent here, but if I had to make a guess, I would use a combination of comparable listings in the MLS and reviewing tax assessed values. And that brings up a really good point. When you are running comps, and I have one more question before we start running into the CMA and things like that, but when you are running comps, do you also look at the tax records?
Not usually. And there's a couple reasons. So I can't speak for the rest of the country, but here in Arizona, the assessed value is not even remotely close to the actual market value of a property. Don't even ask me what the drunk people at the county assessor are up to and why and how it is. I've been in this business for 15 years. I still don't know how they're coming up with these assessed values. The assessed value of our house, it's discounted because they're trying to make people feel like they're getting a deal on their property taxes or something like that. I don't know. So like you look at the assessed value of most houses, it's literally somewhere in the ballpark of half of what the marketable value of most homes here in our area is. So the assessed value is not relevant for our market, but it could be in other markets, right? I don't know how accurate they can be.
I know we've looked at it when we're looking for properties that sell off market though. So I think it is important if you're looking
and so that's what, so what I was going to say is tax record sales could be helpful if you're looking for off market transactions. But even then, I still treat them with a little bit of a grain of salt because I don't know whether it was an arm's length transaction or not, meaning like it could have been a private transaction that was I sold my house to one of my kids and sold it to them at a massive discount. Or more likely in our market is it was an investor, like I sold it to Open Door as an example. So sure, could I pull up that sale? Yes, but is it reflective of what the value of a home that's going to be listed in the MLS it could be? No. It's going to be much lower than that. So I just I don't feel that most tax record sales are reflective of the fair market value of that property.
Fair enough. So before we move into breaking down the CMA, I have one more question for you. Let's say that you don't currently have a habit of studying the market. I would love for you to give the audience what habits can an agent create so that they can build and stay on top of trends without feeling overwhelmed? Like, how do we put this into a practice, into our business?
Well, I think some of it'll come naturally with the extra time that you're going to be spending on the CMAs that I'll hopefully be able to convince everyone to do by the end of our podcast today. But I do really think that at a minimum, like once a week, you should have in your schedule some sort of activity where you're studying the market and looking at the trend. Everyone who has heard me before knows what I track, and it's the month supply of inventory number. So once a week, I used to actually do it every single day, but once a week, I go look at how many actives, pendings, and sold over the past 30 days there are. And then I use that to calculate my month supply of inventory number. What I'm basically looking at is inventory rising or falling compared to the pace at which homes are being sold? And that month supply of inventory number, when it's going up, to me, that, it's just kind of an economic supply and demand principle. If the month supply of inventory number is going up, then your supply is rising faster than your demand. And if that trend continues long enough, prices will fall.
Okay. So here's what I would say. If you're listening now, figure out how to build a 15-minute market study routine and then get it into your calendar. We actually track ours. One of our great real estate coaches, Eileen Rivera, she once said to us, we were talking to her about how we study the market, and she says, oh, and where do you keep this? And at the time, we were just like posting it in Slack, and we didn't even pay for Slack. So every 30 days, that information would disappear. And she says, you should really put this in a format that you could use on a listing appointment. And from that moment on, and this was actually in 2020, we started just dropping it into a Google Sheet, which then we created a simple graph to read the data. And I can't tell you how valuable it has been to be able to see these trends and pull it out.
Especially since we started in 2020. So we got to see the no inventory skyrocketing prices. And now we're seeing so to have something that you've been tracking for years and to be able to go look at and be able to show the seasonalities and all of that stuff, it's really, really valuable.
Okay, let's start to talk about why your CMA is probably broken. Let's talk about, in your opinion, what are some agents missing when they're pulling comps today?
Well, the first thing but before you can even pull the comps, or I'm sorry, you can pull the comps. You can pull the comps anytime you want. But before you can understand what the comps mean, you have to know what the price action in that market segment is doing.
What does price action mean?
Meaning our home values in that segment of the market rising or falling on average. So can I go ahead? Should I go ahead and share the example from our market now with Tempe and then, okay.
Yeah, hold on just a second, because Lisa and Angel, they said, could you share your Google spreadsheet? I'm going to just share my screen real quick so that they can see. And then what I'll do is I will have Kelsey, when she sends out, the replay of this. I'll have her share this. When you guys see this, you're gonna be like, what? That's not even that fancy.
It's not. It's not really something I typically show clients. This is for my benefit.
Yeah, so it's literally, you guys, it's just a spreadsheet. It has the date, the active, the pending, the closed, and the month supply of inventory, as Merrill mentioned. And then we just had our Google Sheet, drop it into a graph. So you can see, as I mentioned, we've been tracking it this way, Merrill, for over 16 years, but now in this spreadsheet for the past 5 years. And this is the active supply of inventory, the pending supply of inventory, and the closed. And some of your like rapid stats and things like that, they might be able to do some of this, but again, to Merrill's point, we're internalizing this data because we look at it every single week and we understand where it's coming from. And this is reflective of the entire Phoenix metro area. And if we were only selling in Gilbert or Queen Creek, we might actually not run the entire MLS. So I know some of you are in really large MLSs, but you don't service the entire MLS. You would want to create a saved search so that you knew exactly how the data was being ran. But we'll go ahead and share, we'll share a link to view this document. There is seriously nothing fancy about it, though.
The point I want to make about writing, doing the numbers yourself, a new thought that just kind of hit me, in school, grade school or high school or whatever, they taught you that when you take notes, you retain the information better. Like that, it doesn't even matter hardly what you're sort of rewriting and repeating what the teacher said, and you might probably never, if you were like me, might not have ever looked at those notes ever again. But the act of taking them helped you learn the information better. I feel the same way about running your own numbers.
Yeah. So, okay, so we were talking about submarkets. We're talking about maybe the first thing as to when they're pulling their comps, what they're missing. So let's go back to that topic.
Yeah. So again, the first thing that we really need to know before we can start knowing how we want to handle our comps, what we want to do with the comps, how we're going to consider their values, is we need to know whether home values in that area are rising or falling. And we had 2 listing appointments last week. So this is like real time, real actual, like what we're working on in our own business right now to give you an idea. The one house was for a house in Tempe with a swimming pool. Now, Tempe is where Arizona State University is, and it is landlocked. I mean, there's no real land left available to build on. There's no new construction. When I say new, there's, high rises and, stuff along Tempe Town Lake being built. But what I mean is there's no huge subdivision housing development type things going in. So, and the home had a pool. So even if it was in an area with a lot of new construction, it wouldn't necessarily be competing with it directly. So I did a search for what, not necessarily comps, but more of like the broader, what are single family homes in Tempe, around this price range and, with these features doing. And I found out that the average and median sales price year over year for that style of home in Tempe was up by about 5% year over year. So that market was doing pretty decent, actually, especially considering the high interest rates and all the stuff that we have going on right now. Then I did pretty much the exact same thing, but for a home in Santan Valley without a pool. So I just was looking at homes in Santan Valley without pools that are kind of, again, this wasn't comps because I was looking more at the broader, like all of Santan Valley, not just a 1 mile radius because I wanted a larger sample size. But looking for homes that are statistically similar, excluding, 55 plus communities, for example, and just finding like homes that are of the same flavor, that's all a chocolate ice cream cone or vanilla ice cream or whatever. So finding homes that are of the same flavor, and Santan Valley is nothing but new construction. Like you can't even trip without hitting a new build. Okay. I mean, they're everywhere. And so those markets are dramatically different. And what we found is that the average and median price in the Santan Valley area was actually down in the ballpark of 6 to 7%. Okay. So you got Tempe that was up, and you got Santan Valley that was down. And we were talking about a swing between the two of more than 10%. Okay, so that's why this like really matters. If you're on a listing appointment in Santan Valley and you've got, average home values losing about 0.5% a month on average right now. I mean, I'm generalizing that. I know it's not a straight line, but you've got house values dropping by almost 0.5% per month. So that means that when you do your CMA and you look back at homes that sold 3 or 4 or 5 months ago, or however long you're going, I mean, ideally we would only be looking at homes that all sold yesterday, right? But there's so few transactions that are happening right now. It's this tough line to walk of like, well, I want to be as recent as possible, but I also want them to be as close to the subject property as possible. And I also want them to be as statistically as similar to the subject property as possible. I'm finding in a lot of my CMAs that I still have to go back 6 months to find the homes that have the right, to find the homes that are, and by the way, no two appraisers are going to agree on which comps to use anyway. So some of this is a little hokey, but I try to look at it in a number of different ways. But again, let's just say.
Well, actually, I am curious. So what is, so you're talking about, because I know this is a question that comes up a lot. You just mentioned that what is your personal process for building a smarter CMA that is looking at, in this case, by the way, I took those numbers and I just threw them into ChatGPT and I asked it to give me that graph. And it just pulled that graph together so that we could show what was happening in, between these two marketplaces. That, by the way, we could have done that with Mesa, which butts up against Tempe, and we would have seen similar because of new construction there. But, take us through, like, when you see this declining market, what is your personal process for building a smarter CMA so that a client can understand? And in this case, when we went on that appointment, remember, the client actually showed us a screenshot and said, I'd love to just get this Zillow number, right? They wanted the Zillow number, which was about $22,000 or $24,000 more than what we believed the home should be listed for.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, so the first thing, let's just to make the math easy for a second, let's pretend that I have a comp that's for $500,000, but I believe the market has dropped by 10% since the time that home sold. Too many agents are just using this $500,000 house as a comp and saying, okay, well, that home sold for 500, so we should be able to get 500, right? Well, no, because that home sold 6 months ago and the market's dropped 10% in that time. So if it were listed and sold today, it would have sold for 450. Now that's a very dramatic swing. Hopefully you don't have any 10% drop. I don't think anywhere in the country do we have a 10% drop over the past 6 months. But I'm just needed to make the math really easy. So first of all, when you're looking at the closed comps, you need to be adjusting them down according to how much your market is going down, not just looking at the sticker price. The next piece that I would say is super, super important is I'm giving way more weight to the pending contracts right now than I am to the closed contracts.
Even if you don't know what it's going to close for?
I'll come back to that in a second. Yeah, so for example, just yesterday I ran a search, and with the help of ChatGPT, I found out that the average pending, if you take a look, the pending price of all the closed comps in Santan Valley, take the average price of the closed, and then you took the average price of the pendings. The pendings are actually lower than the closeds are. Okay, right now.
Which what it was listed at the MLS. So again, we don't know what it's going to
close. So our closed comps say the value is here. Okay, but the pending comps say the value is here. But here's the crazy part: the pending comps aren't going to sell for full price, right? So I took a look at what our average, sales to list price ratio for homes in that area and price range is, and it was about 98%. So that means by the time those homes close, it's actually going to be here. Okay. And most agents are still pricing their homes. If you're in a declining market, you're pricing your homes as if the comps are here, when we should be looking at the pendings and then also adjusting them down based on your average sales to list price ratio. With that said, if you have some pending comps in your CMA that are super relevant, like a model match or next door or on the same street or incredibly similar in terms of upgrades and, and that kind of thing, I always look at the days on market. How long was it on the market? Because I love using that as a clue. Not that it's the end all be all, but if I see a home that was listed for $500,000 and it was on the market for 2 days before going under contract, pretty safe to say they probably didn't, give away the farm. But again, I also do love to call the listing agent and just say, hey, I do have a listing appointment for a home that's very similar to your pending comp at 123 Banana Street. Is there anything you can share with me regarding that contract? As we all know, sometimes they will tell you exactly, oh yeah, we're under contract for blah, and it's going to close on XYZ date. And then other times they won't tell you anything, but it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah. Now, are you factoring in the fact that a lot of the closings in our marketplace, and when I say they're concessions, I'm not talking about compensation. I'm talking literally closing cost assistance. Are you taking that into account when you, and actually that's going to be our next transition, is like how do you discuss this with the client? But are you taking into account some of those things like the concessions that are being given towards closing costs as so you mentioned the pendings are the pendings are below the closed, and we know that the pendings are going to close at 98%, so that number's tracking down. What about some of the other goodies that are involved? How are you factoring those things in?
Yeah, I'll talk about the concessions in a second, but there's just one more thing I just realized that I really didn't say about the CMA that I have to get in. So the active comps, I love also including in my CMA, what are the other active listings that are, comparable, our competition. But here's the catch on these active listings. The sellers, they want to hallucinate that the other active listings are comps. My favorite line to use is, don't forget on these active listings, they are showing us the price at which homes are not selling. Okay. It wouldn't be active if it was selling at that price, it would be pending. Okay. The only exception to that would be is if it's been on the market for like 3 days and they're in the process of negotiating some offers, but they've been on the market for 88 days and they're listed at 500,000. That's not a comp, right? It's an overpriced listing that's likely to cancel or expire. And I also include a lot of canceled, and I like to include the canceled and expireds, not because I think their price is relevant. I'm not really including the canceled or expireds in my valuation model. It's more of a, let me show you all the other people who thought they were going to sell their house too and didn't. I mean, here in the Phoenix area, we're seeing a listing success rate. Actually, I haven't looked at this in a couple of days.
67%.
Okay, yeah, 67. I knew it was right around a third. Okay, a third of all the sellers who were trying to sell their home are canceling or expiring right now. The challenge that I run into is when you kind of talk to sellers about that or other things, it's almost like they always have this, well, that's everybody else, not me. I'm not going to be like that 1/3. Kind of like when you talk to new real estate agents about how the failure rate in real estate is incredibly high and whatever 90% or so of all the agents fail. No one ever sees themselves in the 10%. Oh, well, that's not going to be me. I'm definitely going to be in the 90%.
Or the vice versa. It's the opposite. They're going to be the 10%, not the 90. Right?
It's just no one ever sees themselves as the part that's going to fail, right? And so and that's probably part of my script that I need to work on, is kind of helping them realize like a third, right? Like imagine you lined up all your friends and family and they all needed to sell their house and you got to pick 1 out of 3 of them. They're like, sorry, you don't get to move to Kentucky with the rest of us. You're staying.
So it's so sad. Okay, so to summarize, before we move into the next section, which is actually now presenting these numbers to the seller, if there were, in my mind, I see some, 4 to 5 numbers that are absolutely critical for them to be looking at in the CMA. What are those 4 to 5 numbers? You mentioned days on market.
Well, you were asking about concessions. Sorry, do you want to move on to this, or do you want me to come back to how I'm handling the concessions?
Go ahead and go for it.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got a little lost there for a moment. I apologize. So with the concessions, unfortunately, and I'm so annoyed by this, I want to send an email to the MLS board. When you do an export from our MLS, it does not give you concessions as an export field.
Since August of last year.
Which is stupid because compensation is not the same as concessions. But anyway, I'm not here to try to debate that. But the concessions field is not included in the export, but it is in the MLS under each individual listing. So what I would love to do is, again, going back to figuring out what a market segment is doing, I would be looking at all the homes that did sell in Santan Valley and tell the seller, on average, homes in your price range and in your are giving $7,000 in concessions to the buyer on top of selling for this average price, right? But since I can't do that like at a scale statistically, I just look at I just sort of point out to them when I'm going through the CMA and talking to them about each comp. I say, this one paid $10,000, that one paid $5,000, that one didn't actually pay anything. That's pretty cool. You know what I mean? And I just like point out the amount of concessions that were being paid by their neighbors.
So again, we're transitioning to presenting this to the seller, but to make sure that they're getting, as they're going to go with their numbers, they should have days on market, price reductions, noting like the actives where they started, in my opinion, where they're at now, the pendings where they started and what they went pending under and how many price reductions, the closed, right? Because I know right now in our marketplace as a whole, the list to sales price ratio is 90%. So sellers are having to adjust, again, for the entire, not for the sub-market that you may be going into, but sellers are having to adjust from the time that they originally listed to the time that they actually closed around 10%.
Yeah, well, and to clarify, you're referring, I just want to original. Thank you. Yeah. So the average original list to sales price ratio, if you just look at the sales to list price ratio, it's around 97.3 or whatever that number is. So it's, much better than that, but that's after their 17 price reductions, right? So if you look at the number from their original list price to the sales price, around 90%. So sellers are getting 10% less than they thought they were going to get on average when they put their home on the market. And that's obviously a big deal.
Yeah, so we're moving to the next section. Here's the take it and run moment that you guys need to be aware of. We would suggest that you go back and audit your last 3 CMAs. What would you adjust based on what Merrill just told you about, your market action trajectory? Where would you have suggested a different price? What is that new price now? And then I would challenge you, if you have active listings that are on the market for more than 30 days, use this information and go get yourself a price reduction. But now, Merrill, you said something really interesting to me. You said we have to stop selling the easy button. And agents need to rethink how they're going into their listing presentation, specifically with these numbers in hand. So how do agents need to change the way that they sell their services?
Well, I got started in real estate in 2010. And so the market until the last couple of years has pretty much always been improving. Now, of course, in 2010, you could buy a huge house for a can opener, right? But there was a high volume amount of transactions happening and things like that. We've always kind of been working in an up market. And so I feel like the majority of my real estate career, my value proposition on listing presentations was, oh my gosh, my marketing is so incredible. I'm so incredible. Everything's just so incredible. I'm going to make selling your home fast and easy and fun and enjoyable. And it's just going to be this incredible experience. And we're going to net you the highest possible amount of money. And I've done very well with it. And I feel very good about that value proposition. But lately, it doesn't feel like the appropriate value proposition. Because I'm no longer focused on I'm driving highest possible price, because that's a little bit of a tough thing to focus on right now, because most of the time we're having to really get the sellers to lower their price. And B, I don't think it's going to be easy. And even if I do sell it really fast because we priced it so well from the beginning, we were also seeing an all-time high of cancellations. Right. And so what I'm doing is I want to make sure the seller knows that this market right now in the Phoenix area, I know we do have people all over the country, and there are some markets that are still pretty hot, but at the majority of places, the market has really slowed down and it's really tough. So I don't want to come in there and just say, I'm so wonderful. You're so wonderful. This whole process is going to be wonderful. Instead, I'm coming in and saying, this market is brutal. It is hard. Selling homes sucks. It's taking longer than it's ever taken before. You're giving away more than you've ever given before. Cancellations are higher than they've ever been before. And that's why you need me. Okay. Because I have the experience. I've been through all of this. I know how to navigate through these all murky waters, compared to the, other agents who either haven't been doing it as long, or even if they have been doing it super long time, they probably haven't done as many transactions as I have. I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything or put anybody else down, but I know how to handle rough situations, and I'll do my best to help you. But more importantly, I will communicate with you transparently about what we're seeing and what's happening and what my suggested advice is going to be.
So I agree, right? I'm going in, I think of some of the numbers that I lead with, right? So we talked about the listing success rate, in the Phoenix metro area and much of the Sun Belt, right? So I know in like Buffalo and Boston and in Rhode Island, some of those markets are still popping really good, but a lot of the Sun Belt, Texas and Florida and Georgia and parts of California, right? We are starting to see home sit, Idaho, home sit on the market a little bit longer.
Hold on, did
And
you just lump Idaho in with the Sun Belt?
no, but they're also experiencing some of that as well. They're not part of the Sun Belt, I don't think. I don't
I
think
just
so.
wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so we talk about the listing success rate, right? We talk about I think it's really important to look at that original list price to sales price, because the list to sales price ratio, we did this with Gantry Wilson in Huntington Beach, California, and it was absolutely fascinating. The homes that had to do a price reduction above 5%, it almost tripled the days on market, but the original list price to sales price ended up being somewhere around like 85%. So on average, the more price reductions that they had to do, the less the seller net in the end. So there was this myth that, oh, I can go for this aspirational pricing and it won't affect my overall net. But when we ran the numbers, we actually saw that the more in that tipping point was around 5%. So the risk of listing your home 5% above market value could cost you, a significant amount of money in the end. But so I want to make sure. So then the third number, days on market, right? We know it's on average right now, it's around 90 days here in the Phoenix metro area. You should be tracking your own numbers so that if your numbers are beating the marketplace, that's a great, right? So Mr. Seller, I know that, here in the Phoenix metro area, homes are selling for 90% of the original list price. The great news is we're at 90%, right? The listing success rate is 67. I'm at a 98%. The days on market's 90, we're at 52. And then, really kind of doing that. But you said something also interesting, and shout out to my clients in Georgia who are going on like they're in Savannah. They're going on a crazy amount of listing appointments. And when I spoke to her this week, she said, Kristi, I'm electing to only take right now about 50% of the listings that are being presented to me. And you said that you would not be surprised and you would not be ashamed if your listing appointment met to listing taken percentage was going down right now. Can you explain that?
Not only would I not be surprised, I would be extremely worried if it's not going down. What I mean by that, if you were to track it, my guess is that the vast majority of agents are not tracking this. But if you were to track all the listing appointments that you go on and then track your win percentage, like what percentage of the time do you win? Most agents that I talk to they have a 90% win rate, right? Like we almost never lose a listing. If I get the appointment, I'm getting it, or they're going to die first, right? Like, and
that's extreme.
I'm sorry. I was trying to sound dramatic and cool, but it didn't work. But now we should be choosing. Yeah, I don't want that. I'm not going to take that listing, right? And not in a mean way, but like if we can't come to an agreement on what we think is the appropriate price as agents, me personally, I feel there's nothing more stressful and sort of draining and demoralizing than a listing that isn't selling. And I would just rather, frankly, not take the listing at all than have all the marketing expenses and overhead and the stress and the emotional turmoil of trying to work with a seller who, isn't going to price it according to, or repair it according to my, recommendations. Now, one thing that I get from, I would say one of the most common objections from sellers when they don't agree with you on the price is, well, we'll just lower it later, right? I mean, however they say that. Well, I'm not in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry to sell. I don't mind if it takes 3 or 4 months or 5 months to sell. We'll sit on it. We'll wait, right? I'm sure you guys have all gotten that objection before. And interestingly, and I've got to give a huge shout out here. I was on a coaching call this morning with one of my all-time favorites, Melissa Pilon in Redondo Beach, California. By the way, you guys should go check out her Instagram because she does some of the coolest client events you have ever seen. But we were talking about this exact thing, like how do you handle the objection of when a seller says, I don't mind. I'm not in a rush. I don't mind waiting. Like it's, as agents, we know how, like we try to explain to them, like, listen, it's not about you being in a rush. It's about the fact that the longer the home sits, you're not, but I try to explain that to people, and I don't feel like I get their buy-in, because again, they don't think they're going to be part of the 33% that doesn't cancel, or they don't see themselves in that group yet, and they're not in a hurry, and we'll just lower the price later. And I try to explain why that's detrimental, and sometimes I feel like I am not getting through. So Melissa and I were talking about this morning, and she had what I thought was the best way of handling that I've ever heard, and it was, with a donut, right? Like if you had like a nice hot crispy donut, you'd go out of your way to like go and get that while it's hot. Okay. And you'll pay fair market value for that hot crispy donut, but nobody wants a 3-week-old donut. Even
No, that sounds terrible.
You don't like that? I think that's a beautiful way of handling that.
No,
objection.
I'm saying a 3-week-old donut sounds terrible.
Oh, okay.
I mean, as soon as you said that, I was like, ew, no one wants a 3-week-old donut.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this idea, because Lindsay talked about the fact that this has been a challenging market. And so before we move into the next segment, I just want to say this would be a great opportunity for you to figure out, and I forget who told me this originally, but I've always, for years now, I've been saying this: you have to have 2 out of 3. You have to like the price, you have to like the seller, or you have to like the home. So if you can get 2 out of 3, meaning you like the price, you like the seller, but the home's just meh, maybe you'll take the listing. You don't like the price, the seller's a jerk, you're probably not going to take the listing, right? But I would make your case in point, like, I will walk away from a listing that doesn't meet X, Y, Z.
And I would I would recommend giving yourself a rule ahead of time, right? Like if you're winging it, and like if you're just kind of going in, oh, Melissa's on. Oh, I didn't even realize she was on. That makes me so happy. Okay, awesome. Well, shoot, what? Now her comment made me. That's all your fault, Melissa.
Okay, let's transition. It might come back to you, and you can go from there. So let's talk about radical accountability. Okay. This, so many times right now, like even doing equity reviews, I've had some people say, well, I don't want to tell my client that their value's gone down 6%. That's not a fun call to have, right? So you mentioned something like, it's not your fault, but it's your job, right? Like,
well, yeah.
Why do agents internalize seller disappointments? Like, break that down for them, because it is hard and it is stressful.
It is hard. First of all, let me clarify. I don't think I have like a oh, just do this and you're free of all emotional turmoil. I don't have it. I don't have like an easy button.
Can I have that?
Yeah, I know, right? It wouldn't be legal.
Fair enough.
Okay. But I would say I absolutely love a line so much by the great Glenda Baker. Now, I'm not going to try to do it in her accent, but she says, I don't write the mail, I just deliver it. Okay. Do you want to be the agent who only talks to their people when there's good news to deliver? Right? No, you want to establish the relationship with your clients as the trusted advisor. And sometimes the trusted advisor has to deliver the bad news. And I think if you build your relationship on that principle, not, hey, remember how I told you you were going to buy this house and make gazillions of dollars? No, it's just like hey, it's important to me that all of my clients stay up to date on what's happening in the market. And I don't feel that I would be doing my job misleading you or sugarcoating what we're seeing and what's happening and what's going on with the value of your home. So unfortunately, we have seen the market dip a little bit, and I know that sucks to hear, but here's the good news. Real estate never stays down for long, right? I'm confident you hold on to that. My absolute favorite quote about real estate is, the best time to buy real estate was 5 years ago. The second best time to buy is today.
Right. Now, so along with that, like, how do you stay transparent? Like, what is strong communication? We know, according to NAR that the number one complaint people have about their real estate agent is lack of communication. So what does transparent, strong communication actually look like for you? I love the way that one of my great coaching clients, Lourdes Maestras in Fort Lauderdale, she has the Don't Fire Me report. Check out Tom Ferry's latest podcast on the Don't Fire Me report if you want all the details. She kind of lays out exactly what's in there. But what do you think that actually looks like? What would be the best practices for them right now in a market that may be declining? If their listings are sitting a little bit longer, what does that look like?
You definitely need to have some sort. Well, I would start at the listing presentation. So on the listing presentation, you're going to let them know, like, hey, just so you know, you're going to be hearing from me on Tuesdays, or like, whenever you plan on making your updates, and I'll reach out to you at least once a week, if not more often, to discuss, what's been happening. And in all transparency, if things aren't going well, I will call you to let you know, hey, we're doing everything that we can on our end, and we're not seeing the results. We need to make an adjustment. I do find that if you plant that seed about potentially making an adjustment down the line, it's much easier to have the conversation later. Hey, remember when I told you that if things weren't going well, we would be having this conversation. So planting that seed at the beginning, I think is a really important piece. Second, you definitely need some sort of formal weekly seller communication, not necessarily your phone call to talk about it, but a Don't Fire Me report or a weekly seller report. And it doesn't need to be super fancy, but you should be checking, are there any new updated comps that might be affecting our home's value? And how are we doing so far? A report card, like, are we getting enough showings? Are we getting enough online views and traffic? I mean, we have an example of a weekly seller report that we do, but sometimes I don't love sharing it with people because it's 3 pages long and it looks complex and hard to build. And I think sometimes people are like, that's too hard. It could be a Google Doc. Okay, that just says Zillow, 300 views, right? Like, it doesn't need to be all gorgeous and beautiful, but I do think that your conversations with the sellers will go better when backed by data. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we only had this many views online, or we only had 2 showings, or or those kinds of things. So yeah, you definitely need regular seller communication, both verbally calling and talking to them, but I think you should also have a Don't Fire Me report that goes to them as well.
So Cheryl asks, when you've done all the price reductions that the seller can possibly afford, and I have something that I want to say before you jump into, and you're priced ahead of the current market, but you're still not seeing the action. What else can you do to calm the seller and the fears? So one of the things that we're actually looking at right now, especially in declining markets, and especially if they purchased the home like in the past 2 years and they're in a community where new construction is, because that's, again, the new construction is decimating our resale market here in the Phoenix metro area, in places like Georgia, Florida, Texas, right? Do they have the ability to sell? That's a really good question. Like, if you know that the home's here and they're like, hey, but Merrill, I need to be up here, right? So we're looking at their actual ability. Can you bring money to the table? Are you going to short sell? Like, what can you do? If they cannot, they're saying they want you to list it up here, but it's not going to sell up there. That's a really good question. But what are you doing to calm the seller's fears?
Well, I think our preferred lender for many, many years, he said a quote to me that just stuck with me forever. He says, what we're really paid to do in this industry is manage people's emotions, right? Like, and I find, for me, the best way to do that is to just stay factual and present the options, right? So, I get it. There are sellers who are upside down right now, who cannot sell their home in the traditional way. So when that is the case, I like to come with them and I just say, okay, guys, we're trying. We've done everything we can. We've done that. We can't lower the price any further. We've done 18 open houses. We've done, all these postcards, or we've done all this social media. We've done everything that we know how to do, and it's still not moving. So here's our choices, right? Choice number 1, we can be patient and continue to wait, right? Like, maybe the right buyer will come. But it doesn't seem likely based on what we've seen so far, right? Option number 2, we could look at renting it, right? And I know a lot of places right now, if you rent it, you're also losing money, right? Like, maybe you rent it and you're going to lose $500 a month renting it, but some sellers would rather lose $500 a month renting it than have to bring $20,000. I mean, everyone has different tolerances, right? I'm just presenting them their options and saying, okay, you could do this. You could rent it. You could potentially look at selling it creatively, subject to or assumable, or, different things like that. Or scared to even say this out loud, but you could also look at a potential short sale. Not a beautiful solution, but it is a solution. Like, so here's your options, right? Here's all the different things that you could do with the home. Which one of these do you hate the least?
Yeah, just giving them the options, and really coming back to that transparent communication. I had the privilege of being with Tom, this past week in Salt Lake City doing the Listing Edge event, and he said something to me that I wrote it down actually, and it brings back. So it's as simple as here's what happens next. Tell them what you're going to do, right? Tell them what their options are. Tell them what you're going to do. Do it, and then tell them that you did it. Right? Like it is as simple as that. People need to know what's going on. And Chris Voss, when he spoke at one of the Success Summits, he talked about not holding your clients hostage. When we don't communicate with them because we don't have good news, we're holding them hostage. So even if you don't have any good news, pick up the phone, do the email, create the video, whatever it is that you're going to do, but tell them what happens next. Tell them what you're going to do it, and then tell them that you did it. You will find that much of their fears go down. And we did have a listing this year that we took off the market and turned into a rental, because at what price are you no longer a seller? Right? Like, I don't want to get you to your bottom line. In fact, that goes against our grain. Merrill and I have always prided ourselves on, we will get you the most money. No one will outmarket us. But at what price are you no longer a seller? These are your options. And so the home that we didn't sell this year successfully, the seller did everything he possibly could do. He reduced, he landscaped the backyard. But the fact of the matter is, he was in a community where the builder was still building, giving away incredible incentives, and it didn't make sense for him to reduce the price. It made more sense, even at a loss, to turn it into a rental. So, okay, Merrill, to wrap up, if someone's listening right now only does one thing differently after this episode, what should it be?
I would really like more agents to study their market more and know what is happening with the market that they serve. Again, if you don't necessarily need to use your entire MLS, right? If you only work in one specific zip code, or you only work in the high end, or you only work on, but you need to know intimately what is happening with the segment of the market that you serve, and be able to speak to it in a little bit of a numbers driven way. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get all this analytical with your clients, right? But if you try to explain all of what we've spoken about today on a listing presentation, and why you're adjusting these comps in this way, and many clients don't want all the detail. Like, I get it. You want to be good at like personality profiling and kind of understanding how much level of detail do I need to go into when I'm explaining all of this to the seller.
Okay. I like it. We have one last question. I think we have time. Lindsay says, in my area, the San Francisco Bay, there are agents doing dramatic price drops of $100,000, hoping to reset the price and get $50,000 above that. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that that's ultimately up to, it's a strategy. You know what I mean? The whole idea of intentionally, pricing a home dramatically low to essentially create a bidding war is similar to like you're listing a home for $1, and it's a strategy worth trying. In my opinion, it's not quite, it doesn't feel like the right flavor for our market, because we don't see that being used very often. But I know in lots of parts of California, people will intentionally list the homes low to create the multiple offer situation. I feel like in our area, what we get more of people, as soon as they find there's multiple offers, they, oh, you know what, never mind. I don't want it that bad. I don't want to get involved in all of that. So I do my best to price it at what, and also we get, heavier pushback from some of the clients about really feeling uncomfortable with that, but it is a strategy. I think it's actually ultimately up to the seller, right? I think that the listing agent should explain to the seller, hey, we could try this. We could also try this. we could also try that. Which of those options do you think sound most appealing?
Okay, I like it. Well, if this episode challenged you, that's good. That means you guys are growing, right? So we want you to take what you've heard, implement it this week, and don't forget to tell us about it. Like, drop us a message, let us know how these strategies work for you. The most important thing to me is that you came here, you spent the past hour with us. Take these ideas and implement and get into action. We appreciate your time. Go out there, help some families, sell some homes, support your family, and have a phenomenal weekend.